Welcome to Race Control Redux episode 2. In this episode, we'll be going through how to defend against a faster opponent when your main concern is simply staying ahead. The key to attacking someone on track is getting the inside line into the next corner, so it's natural that the key to defending is covering that line. This involves a mixture of knowing where the track goes and knowing where your opponent is, so try not to race on unknown tracks if you can help it, learn them beforehand if you can. Now then, covering the inside line doesn't necessarily mean running right up against the inside painted line. You can almost always run safely a full car width away from that, simply because no one would try and overtake from that close to the edge. If they do, they'll either run wide instantly or have to go so slowly that you can easily get the place back by running the outside line and just waiting them out. Depending on the corner, you can usually defend from even further away from the edge, but make sure that you have the inside covered properly, otherwise you risk letting them past. Now let's take a worst case situation. You're both heading into a tight corner side by side and you've got the outside line for whatever reason. If your opponent does everything by the book, then you've probably lost, but if he runs wide under braking, then you have a chance for something called a cutback. This is where your opponent leaves a gap to the inside line mid-corner, allowing you to dive in and get a better exit. Be warned though that this is not always as it seems. A successful cutback will always put you on the inside of the corner you just exited, but this also means that it might put you on the outside of the corner you're going into. There's not much you can do about this unless your exit is so good that you can move across afterward. Just bear in mind that your opponent might be trying to hang you out to dry in the next corner. Speaking of which, there's a little technique that can dramatically increase your gap from an attacker with very little effort. In a long corner such as Monza's Parabolica, you can get the inside line, brake slightly earlier, and take a very slightly wider line on entrance and then power out onto the straight. If your opponent wasn't planning to do the same, then he'll carry too much speed into a wider line than he intended, which will wash out his front end and give him understeer, allowing you to get a much better exit and open up the gap. This can also happen naturally if your attacker outbrakes himself, but it can be beneficial to make your own luck from time to time. Respect is important on the racetrack, but never allow yourself to be intimidated by your opponent. You can expect to run a few inches from other cars throughout a corner, and this speaks of defence going into a corner too. Don't squeeze an attacker off the track if he's taken the outside line, but at the same time you shouldn't be afraid to run a little further from the inside edge if you know he's not in your way. This allows you to get the best exit you can, just don't make any erratic movements or nerves will get frayed and mistakes become more likely. Finally, let's talk about defending from multiple opponents. Some people make the mistake of thinking these groups work together against them, when in actuality each one is working towards their own goals. With this in mind, you can apply basic racecraft to each individual opponent, prioritising whichever one seems to be causing the most trouble. You can also use them against each other by taking the defending line, braking a tiny bit softer and longer, and hanging them out as we went through earlier. This will cause an even larger effect in groups and leave them squabbling among themselves while you power away. Just be careful not to inadvertently push the outermost opponent off the track. That's all for Race Control Redux episode 2. Suggestions welcome, please subscribe, and as always, thanks for watching.